This is Erik McKinney, joined by Greg Katz. And Greg, we are looking back at the first week of spring ball. And this was a Tuesday practice the media could attend without pads, a Thursday practice without pads the media could not attend, and then Saturday, the first day, full pads. And there was a lot of energy for that one. And it started off, Clay Helton said earlier in the day on Saturday, I think you guys are going to like what we do up front. And it was an Oklahoma drill, kind of old school, mano a mano, running back, and a few guys out blocking and trying to tackle. But we'll look kind of back at some of the big picture stuff from those first three practices at USC. And you and I talked a lot leading into spring ball. The number one thing we were watching was the offensive line and at left tackle. And what we've seen so far is Cortland Ford with the first team at left tackle. Not a surprise, I think, to either of us heading into spring that we'd see him there. Your thoughts on kind of that being the case, him getting the call early?
Well, I think based on last season, we knew that he was the one they were going to at least start off trying to fit in there. The quicker, the better for the health of Keaton Slovis. And I don't think that Ford, is a bad option whatsoever. You got to start somewhere. And if they already know that this is a guy, like take last year when they moved over Vera Tucker from guard to tackle, it makes things so much easier. He's already knows things. What he doesn't know is basically the new blocking system or the nuances that Coach Clay McGuire wants to put in. Hopefully that'll be advantageous for him. But aside from him, I was always curious who his backup would be. I don't think there's any question that unless something, a bolt of lightning comes out of the sky, that Cortland Ford isn't going to be the starting left tackle. The question is who replaces him? And of course, that's always the big question. And when you think of big question, you talk about Casey Collier, who's a big man at 6'9", 315, who Clay Helton referred to as a young deer finding his legs, and kind of compared him to Zach Banner. But, I don't think that, to be honest with you, I don't think Collier is a threat to unseat Cortland Ford at this point. Cortland Ford does have experience, and they need somebody that's experienced.
Yeah, and really the only three guys we've seen who we haven't seen before, Cortland Ford, they're starting at left tackle, Casey Collier right behind him, and then out to right tackle too. You've got Jalen McKenzie there, and then behind him, Jonah Monheim. Those are the three, young guys, freshmen who came in 2020 that are with that two deep. And the first team across the line looks exactly the way it did last year with Andrew Voorhees and Brett Nealon, Liam Jimmins, and then Jalen McKenzie. I mentioned kind of going left to right with Cortland Ford out there at tackle. And then the backups behind them, what we've seen so far, Jason Rodriguez has been the guy at left guard, Justin Dietich backing up Brett Nealon at center, Liam Douglas at right guard, and then, like I said, Jonah Monheim out there at right tackle. And the coaches talked about seeing a whole bunch of different, matchups and mixing guys and doing that. Two practices so far, same five guys with the first team, same five guys with the second team. So who knows what we're going to see, I guess, as time goes on. But certainly the coaches feel comfortable. Hey, that's our best option, or the group we want to look at first together. And again, like we said, not a surprise to see Cortland Ford there, and he's done well so far. Certainly not a case where you're thinking, okay, let's see somebody else there at left tackle. So could end up being a thing where you let him go, and we'll drop back a level. Cortland Ford, a big important piece up there for the offensive line, trying to block for Keaton Slovis, and what his sort of questions about his arm and his throwing ability and what he was going to look like. That was a big thing coming into spring ball. Got to see a little bit of him at pro day, how he was throwing it. He talked early, in the week about sort of the confidence that he has in his arm and how he's come back and how he's different. Through a few practices, those questions of, well, what is going on with that ball, they're not there anymore. I don't know if he's really confidently driving it downfield the way we saw his freshman year, but it does not look like the fall. And so with the questions at quarterback, you've got, is Keaton Slovis fully back? And that answer, I think, is trending towards yes. And then the two freshmen, I know you were interested in kind of that through a week. What are your thoughts kind of on that whole quarterback position? Because not only do you need to figure out, is Keaton Slovis back? Is he your guy? Who's behind him? And without Matt Fink, that becomes a very big question.
Well, it's a big question, but it's also a fun question because it talks about competition. Let me just start off briefly. The biggest question I thought coming in offensively was the condition of Keaton Slovis physically. And I think he's answered the bell as you have suggested. Okay. But what we don't know is the emotional part. You know, they say a true champion isn't one that gets knocked down, but one who gets back up after being knocked down. And I would say emotionally, Keaton Slovis was knocked down by his own admission. He said, I didn't have my confidence. And we all know that, you know, quarterbacks are like pitchers in baseball. They lose their confidence. They can't hit the strike zone, or, you know, he hesitates. Why he lost his confidence, I don't think he specifically said it, but I would say that when you get knocked around like he did last year, it's pretty hard to focus downfield when you think you're going to get your head torn off. But transitioning into the backups, I think that Jackson Dart and Miller Moss have done exactly what was expected when they got here. As Coach Helton, I think, accurately describes, they've been brilliant at times, and at times they look like freshmen coming out of high school. And we should note that, you know, Dart did play a high school senior season. Okay. So it's not like he's been away from the game, but not the case with Miller Moss. I mean, when's the last time Miller Moss was in a game? What, 2 years ago at Alamany? Because he was supposed to play at the Mater Dei. And of course, we know that that didn't work out eligibility wise, nor was the fact that there was football in California in the fall. So if anyone's going to be behind, it's going to be Miller Moss. But he's a smart kid. He'll come back. And I think that neither one of them is ready to step in right this moment and play even against San Jose State. But it's not where they are today or next week. It's where they are, you know, come September, the first week of the season. So it's going to be an interesting competition.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mo Hassan is in there too, kind of for that back. The guys that are playing, I think one of the big themes from that first week is who's not out there. Clay Helton said before Tuesday's practice, before spring ball kind of kicked off, oh, we'll have some guys that won't be with us due to health and safety protocols. Turns out those were not some guys. Those are some major, major names, especially on defense. Well, offensively, we have not seen running back Keenan Christon. We have not seen wide receiver Brew McCoy. But on the defensive side of the ball, outside linebacker Drake Jackson, cornerback Chris Steele, middle linebacker Raylan Goforth. Those are three almost definite starters, certainly in Steele and in Jackson and Raylan Goforth. Absolutely, you expect to fill back in there. When you add in the injuries, Greg Johnson, we haven't seen go fully yet. Defensive tackle Brandon Peely, we haven't seen go fully yet. And then even though we did see Isaiah Polamalu on Tuesday, he was not out there on Saturday. So, I mean, you are at maybe well over half your projected starting lineup on defense that we have not seen. What it has done is let some guys kind of step up and make plays in that. But boy, when you look at kind of the quarterback, cornerback depth chart, the wide receiver depth chart, there are some guys missing there. I guess kind of maybe as a former coach looking at it, not having those guys in, what does that do for them, for your team, for the guys playing, and just kind of thoughts on not having those guys for this first week?
Well, that's a pretty simple one to ask if I put on my coach's hat. And that is, number one, the players that are missing, most of them all have game experience. They all understand the system. SC didn't have spring ball last year to put in Orlando's system, but they had at least 6 games to play under the system and correct things. So I'm not so worried about guys not being ready right now because, you know, the good news, bad news, the bad news are not there, but they're experienced. You know, on a side note, I was looking at the roster, and Drake Jackson is listed as an outside linebacker, no longer the little slash defensive end. But I think it does open up an opportunity for players that they're going to need to back up these players to show what they can. You know, you take a look at, you know, the newcomers. You take a look at Alfred, the transfer safety. He was out there starting today. with Chase Williams. So, these are players that are, I think, that need spring ball more than others. I think they all need it just to, kind of, shine up their memories of what they're doing. But I think it's really a case that, in the case of, let's say, Clay Helton, I thought one of the funny things is maybe I'm losing it at my age, but I didn't recall that Figueroa was out with surgery from a labia surgery. And so I'm listening to him talk, and it's kind of one of the things like you kind of alluded to, although it's not, I don't mean this as an indictment in any way. As my grandmother used to say, ask me no questions, I'll tell you no lies. In other words, don't ask me about somebody, otherwise I have to tell you about somebody. Not that obviously Helton wasn't lying. He said, Figueroa is not out there. I didn't recall hearing Figueroa not being out there for whatever reason. So it's like, you got to keep asking him. He's not going to volunteer the answer. When you got, when you're out there looking at spring ball and you go, hey, listen, where is so-and-so? Or why isn't he? I think the difficult part is there's no immediate answer after practice. You have to wait till Monday or Tuesday to get an answer, which is like, like watching a game on, tape delayed basis 48 hours later. So no, I wouldn't be all that alarmed about who's not out there at the moment. But if, injuries happen with the newcomers or the young guys, let's say like even a guy like Sakona at defensive tackle, you want him to be out there. You don't want to sit there and say, well, he's missing. Otherwise, what does spring practice do?
Yeah, and I forgot to mention Nick Figueroa when I was going through that long list, and so now you're well over, the probable defensive starters, and I do think it is at this point. I mean, a guy like Figueroa not coming back till midsummer, he's in certainly a different conversation. But the guys that, again, Clay Helton said they expect back kind of in the coming days, it might be a best case scenario where they get a little bit of the wear and tear off their bodies for spring. What a lot of these guys bring back, and the guys playing behind them have done well, and they're going to be fired up. I mean, someone is not keeping Drake Jackson off the field this season, but boy, you give Hunter Echols some time out there, you give Giuliano Faliuco some time out there. They like the idea of that. I feel like they're going to raise their game, and we've seen a lot of that from a lot of the guys so far. And one of the guys who has gotten a lot of time again at one of those position groups that has been hurt, and with Chris Steele out, all the corners have kind of bumped up a little bit. The one position switch, there were a couple guys in that roster that we saw before spring ball that moved from safety to linebacker, but only one guy made a very significant change, and that was Joshua Jackson going from wide receiver to cornerback. And it was one of those things where initially my thought was, I hope he doesn't get lost. When guys make position switches, that's kind of the fear, is he going to just kind of fill some depth and then you get lost at that new spot because it's not your spot and you don't bring everything you can to it. That has not been the case. From what we saw Tuesday, the first day, he absolutely jumped out. On Saturday, he was again another star. Some guys just have that cornerback ability, and he brings with him just this combination of kind of athleticism and almost this, like, he doesn't know how to fail at the position yet. So he is playing so well. And again, it's such a small sample size. There's still so far to go until fall, but he has been absolutely terrific. He made the play of the day on Saturday when he stays with KD Nixon on a deep ball and kind of brings this ball in over his shoulder as he's going to the ground. And it's been remarkable to see him. I mean, it sounds a little crazy to talk about this guy actually playing significant minutes in the fall, but we're getting close to where that might need to be a conversation with the way he's played so far in the spring.
Well, USC, through my experience over the generations, has always had athletes that could play on both sides of the ball. One time I remember there was a lineman named Ray Peters from St. Francis a long time ago, and he was a defensive lineman. They needed help at center. He switched over, played center, and helped, in a drive for a championship and did well. You take a guy like Josh Jackson. Look, he was a wide receiver. He knows what a defensive back is looking for. He can think as a defensive back what an offensive wide receiver wants to do to him. Okay. And the players that play wide receiver, true wide receivers, they are athletes. They're athletes. They can change direction. They can accelerate. They can decelerate. You know, he's had experience in the past. You know, a lot of players go two ways in high school. So it's not foreign. It's not a foreign thing. You know, it might be the best thing that ever happened to Josh Jackson. And that would mean it's a good thing for USC. Let's face it, there is an open spot there. Okay. Maybe it's not as open as maybe you think it's open, but it's open enough that he's going to have the opportunity to show that this transition was a good move for him and for the team.
Yeah, and I mean, it's one of those things, you lose a body from the wide receiver group where, you know, that position is starting to look a little thin too. But at this point, you figure USC can find an answer at receiver. There's receivers everywhere. Finding a guy who's potentially now kind of an elite corner, that is something you want on every team. And I will say, nobody loves sort of backup wide receivers quite like a cornerback coach. They look at the wide receivers and they always see, hey, that guy could be a great corner. Send him my way, send him my way. So Dante Williams he wins one here, I think, getting Josh Jackson over on that side. Sort of main point that I want to hit here from the first week are the newcomers. It was a massive influx of guys. When you see the field out there right now, it does not look like a spring practice. Between the seniors who came back for the extra year and between, you know, there's 14 total guys, not all of them participating in spring, but the early enrollees and the transfers who came over, it looks like a fall practice. It is a full roster. There are a ton of guys out there, and a few of the newcomers, and I'd start off with running back Keontae Ingram and safety Xavier Alford, also Katie Nixon, the transfer who came over from Colorado. Those guys have clearly played before. When you see them, how they fit in, they are veterans who are coming in. They understand kind of this level. Alford hasn't been in college long, just the 1 year at Texas. But when you look at Ingram and Nixon, those are guys I think that are going to contribute right away. And then the other guys that have stood out, Michael Jackson the third at wide receiver, he has jumped in there and done very well. And I really like USC brought in 3 early enrollee safeties, and that's Kalen Bullock and Anthony Beavers and Zamarian Gordon. And those guys physically look the part already and have been very good. But there's kind of guys everywhere. Julian Simon is a guy that I didn't mention there. I think they're all worth mentioning. And the coaches in that first week were very clear. I don't want to put any one of these guys above any other and say, oh, this guy's done well, and you know, this specific guy's done well. But they've been pretty clear. Hey, across the board, these guys knew what it took to come in and contribute early. And so far, they're doing everything right. And that's a really good sign for a class that was ranked really highly. USC needed some of these guys to be able to come in and push guys above them, I think.
Well, you know, it was an unfair playing field for a lot of the players coming in, of the newcomers. Some of them played in the fall, the Texas guys, okay? Alfred, of course, had experience coming from Texas. Okay, so it's the California guys that probably were a little rusty, but you have to remember, they're so excited to play because they didn't play in the fall. They probably were chomping at the bit for the weight training and strength program, trying to suck up everything they can. There's not going to be any downside. So mentally, they're all in, and that's really important. And I did like what Todd Orlando said in his morning press conference, where he said, I don't want to name names until I see them with pads on. And so it'll be interesting to see, because they're going to break down the film. They're going to see things that the media doesn't see, okay? And that's what's going to show. I think, to me, one of the highlights was something that you put up, I know, on the message board, and I watched it maybe 6 times over and over, was watching, Quincy run the ball. How does he pronounce his name again?
Quincy Jouty, the running back.
Yeah. I watched all 3 sections. I watched who was carrying the ball. I identified him, number 27. I watched who was blocking, who was, taking on the block. And I watched the secondary play of Julian Simon. That hit by Simon was not a hit that a normal freshman makes. And if you've seen a picture of Julian Simon, he does not look like a normal freshman. He came right up and he gave him what we call a stick. And he took him to the ground. Jonty did go low, but Simon went lower and took him to the ground, which tells me this guy shows no fear as a true freshman. Because what you don't know is you don't know when the pads get on and the 21-year-old goes against the. I mean, let's be honest. How old is Jonty now? He must be 22 years old. I think he's a grad student, so he's in a fully developed situation. And here you have a true freshman who doesn't look like a true freshman, who actually looks probably like he's a junior already, but he's still a freshman, has no fear whatsoever, and he comes up. And that's what the coaches want to see. They want to see everybody looks good on 7-7 with just a helmet on and no pads. But this is where you find out who's the deer in the headlights and who's the headlights. And that was a case. And there's a reason why they put up on the board and on the official site to show that play. And that was to demonstrate. Now here's a true newcomer that comes to hit.
Yeah, again, that's us kind of wrapping up the first week. I don't think anybody across college football has a bad first week of spring ball, but again, USC is they're going to be in that mix. There's a lot of positives to take from this first week, and certainly a lot of questions and a lot of intrigue, I think, about a few topics moving forward too. And so we'll see what week 2 brings. They're going to come out of the gate on Tuesday and practice in the Coliseum. So that'll be kind of another sort of, I think, a hit of energy for the team there as they come out. So like Clay Helton said, it's full pads as much as they can do, and it's as much hitting as they can do. And Saturday being the first day that they could really get into that, I think it lived up to what he promised and what they thought that it would look like. So again, a positive first week for the USC Trojans as they start 2021 spring ball. For our look back at the week, for Greg Katz, this is Erik McKinney. Thanks for watching WeAreSC.